There were days so feared in ancient Rome, even emperors refused to leave their homes. Armies paused, markets froze, and everyday Romans acted like the sky itself might fall because it wasn't just a superstition. These cursed dates had a body count. You would think the Romans were obsessed with death since they had a reputation for being brutal, but it wasn't dying that freaked them out. It was dying on the wrong day, in the wrong way, with the gods giving you a cosmic thumbs down. And if we are talking about days the Romans genuinely feared, like stay-at-home feared, the Ides of March was the Halloween of their calendar, where nobody was having fun. Originally, it wasn't even spooky, it was just tax season. The Ides of March, March 15th, started as the deadline to pay off your debts. But everything changed when Julius Caesar strolled into the Senate like he was untouchable and left looking like a pincushion, stabbed 23 times by the very people who used to toast him over wine and breadsticks. His best friend was there, too, adding a betrayal so deep it basically broke Rome's collective trust issues for the next 500 years. After that, the Ides of March became the official day of paranoia. Romans started treating it like a cursed date where scheming, betrayal, and power plays were practically guaranteed. Nobody felt safe. But betrayal was just the appetizer. If March 15th was about broken friendships, plague season was about full-on societal collapse. Because when the gods stopped sending warnings and started sending body bags, you knew things had gone full apocalyptic. The Antonine Plague, Rome's most traumatic welcome home gift. Several thousand years ago, Roman soldiers came back from campaigning in the East, bringing souvenirs, stories, and a mystery disease that spread faster than gossip at a toga party. Historians think it was either smallpox or measles, but honestly, it could have been both doing a team-up tour. It resulted in utter chaos, 5 million dead, whole cities emptied out like someone yelled, "Free land in Gaul." Even the emperor caught it and died, a proof that this plague wasn't checking titles. You could be a senator, a servant, or a guy just trying to use the bathhouse without coughing up a lung. No one was safe. Death was everywhere, but it wasn't just the dying that scared them, it was the days it hit. Plague didn't just bring sickness, it brought cursed days. Dates etched into memory where markets closed, temples emptied, and neighbors locked their doors tighter than a Senate secret. People weren't just afraid of dying, they were afraid of living through another one of those days. Public spaces became haunted. People stopped going to temples, not because they stopped believing in the gods, but because praying next to a sneezing stranger felt like a one-way trip to Hades. Entire cultures of fear emerged overnight. New religious movements popped up like medieval pop-up ads, each promising divine protection, while the old gods got blamed, like expired yogurt. Rome never really let go of that paranoia. The plague scarred their collective memory. Entire dates became cursed anniversaries. Public gatherings were watched like they were staging a disaster drill. The plague had come and gone, but the fear of those days stuck around like a bad smell. Economically, Rome was wrecked. Trade routes shut down, food prices soared, and social trust hit rock bottom. Even the air itself became suspicious. People acted like breathing near someone was a gamble. If you even coughed near someone, the friendship was over. Historians describe it as a psychological pandemic, just as much as a biological one. And this wasn't even the last time Rome got hit with plague madness. What really haunted them were the cursed days left behind, dates everyone remembered for the worst reasons. It wasn't just about losing people, it was about losing normal life. Every time the plague resurfaced, it just added another cursed day to the calendar, and that fear was carried over for generations. Next up, there were days in ancient Rome when people just didn't do anything. No meetings, no court cases, no starting new projects. Not because they were lazy, but because the calendar told them not to. These days were called dies Nefasti, or unlucky days. Over 100 of these days were scattered across the year, officially marked as too dangerous to do anything important. The idea was that the gods weren't in the mood. Either they were unavailable, angry, or just being dramatic. And when the gods were in one of those moods, the smart move was to stay out of the way. Public business shut down completely. You couldn't pass a law or perform a public ritual. Even the priests stayed home. And if the people whose job it was to talk to the gods were like, not today, you better believe nobody else was picking up that phone either. And these weren't just random vibes. Most Dies Nefasti were tied to something terrible that had happened on that exact date. Maybe a temple caught fire, or maybe someone tried to hold a ceremony and got struck by lightning mid-prayer. Rome's response wasn't, let's not do that again. It was, let's never do anything on this date ever again. What made these days truly terrifying was what could happen if you ignored them. The Romans believed that holding public events on a cursed day could offend the gods, and when the gods were offended, they didn't send a memo. They sent disasters, fires, floods, crops failing, sudden deaths. One unlucky magistrate once collapsed mid-trial on a Dies Nefastus, and the city took it as a sign that the whole government needed to sit down and shut up for a bit. And if something went wrong, you didn't just suffer, everyone else did too. The entire city could pay the price for your calendar-blind ambition. That is what made these days scarier than death. Death, at least, was simple. You die, people mourn, maybe they build you a little statue. But breaking a Dies Nefastus meant you lived long enough to be hated by everyone while everything fell apart around you. Sometimes the scariest days in Rome weren't about plagues or curses. They were about battles that went so badly they marked the calendar with permanent scars. The internal ones were worse because when Romans started fighting each other, that hit different. The civil wars, and there were many, all of them were brutal, personal, and messy. These were Rome versus Rome, senators versus senators, generals betraying their own men, cities flipping sides like reality TV alliances. And the fear wasn't just battlefield stuff, it was the total collapse of normal life. You could go to bed thinking your cousin was a loyal Roman and wake up to find him torching your villa in the name of the Republic. At one point, the bodies were piling up in the Forum. Rome wasn't just bleeding, it was eating itself alive. And that is what made it worse than dying. Because dying was one thing, but watching your friends turn on each other, realizing you might be on the wrong side of history before lunch was terrifying. There was this one battle where over 50,000 Romans were slaughtered in a single day. That date wasn't just remembered because of the bloodshed. It was remembered because of what it meant. Nobody wanted to seal a deal on Remember When Everyone Died Day. Losing a battle was one thing, but it shattered Rome's entire sense of security. They lost more soldiers than they ever thought possible, leaving the city defenseless and vulnerable. For years afterward, August 2nd was treated like a bad omen. People dreaded it coming around again. Business deals avoided, ceremonies postponed. The Romans feared the consequences of losing so badly that their entire society could crumble overnight. And that fear carried over to other dates marked by disaster, like the days when foreign armies camped outside the city, raiding nearby towns, burning crops, and starving the city out. Every time an enemy force lingered near Rome, the Romans braced themselves for another catastrophe. And the longer the threat lasted, the more cursed those days felt. But it wasn't just about battles. It was about what those dates did to their world. Death was final, but surviving a disaster day meant dealing with the aftermath. Poverty, starvation, and shattered families. The psychological damage was worse than death itself. Imagine living through a day where your city nearly collapses only to wake up and do it all over again, year after year, whenever that anniversary rolled around. Romans didn't just fear dying, they feared living through the same nightmare twice. And those cursed dates were like calendar reminders of everything that could go wrong. That's why they feared certain days more than death, because dying was simple. Living through the aftermath, that was the real terror. Let's rewind even further. Before the empire, the marble, the ego, Rome got absolutely wrecked. A group of angry Gauls, led by Brennus, marched in like uninvited guests at a toga party and left the place in ashes. The Gauls stormed the city, looted it, burned it, and then, just to rub salt into the wound, demanded gold as tribute. The Romans tried to pay up, but Brennus wasn't satisfied. So what did he do? He threw his sword on the scale to tip it and shouted, "Vae victis." It means, woe to the defeated. Basically the ancient version of, cry harder, you lost. This wasn't just a military defeat, this was public humiliation. Rome had never been invaded before, never watched its temples burn or seen its elders murdered in the streets. They had no backup plan, no hero's last stand. They just lost. And it broke something in them. For them, it was generational trauma. For centuries after that, Romans talked about the sack of Rome like it was their personal horror story. Even once they got rich and powerful, the memory of that one time the front door got kicked in and the house got robbed never really left them. That day changed everything. Rome started fearing invasion more than death. They started building walls, militarizing like crazy, and treating every outsider like a potential invader. Because they learned the hard way. If it happened once, it could happen again. And that kind of fear doesn't fade. It gets baked into the system. And then came the fear of being forgotten. Not ignored, erased. That is what Damnatio Memoriae was all about. It means condemnation of memory. And if your name landed on that list, the empire didn't just kill you, they acted like you never existed. Rome called it abolitio nominis, the abolition of your name. You didn't get a grave. Your name got scraped off public buildings. Statues of you? Beheaded. And your family? Not allowed to mourn you. They couldn't even say your name without risking trouble. Imagine dying and your mom legally can't cry about it. That is cold. And the scariest part was that it didn't come out of nowhere. There were actual days when these announcements dropped. Edicts from the Senate saying, yep, this guy is out. You could wake up one morning and suddenly your uncle, who used to be emperor, is now just blank space. This kind of thing happened to big names, too. After one dude had his brother killed, classic sibling rivalry, he didn't stop there. He had his face erased from portraits, his name scraped off monuments, and even coins were melted down. It was like watching someone rage delete their ex from Instagram, except forever. But here's why it really freaked people out. Romans lived for legacy. Your name, your family line, your reputation. That was the point of everything. Statues, tombs, inscriptions. Those were your immortality. So when people saw others getting erased, it was an absolute horror. If they could be wiped out, so could you. That is why those days, those announcements, those quiet temple whisperings, those silent removals hit harder than actual death, because death, at least, lets you be remembered. This was nothingness, and Romans feared nothing more than being nothing. For the Romans, fear was baked into their everyday life, but not every cursed day needed a headline. Sometimes it was just a vibe. Without modern medicine, the Roman explanation for getting sick was whatever felt spookiest. A rash was probably a god's punishment. A birthmark shaped like a goat? Definitely a bad omen. They didn't know what germs were, but they did know comets, solar eclipses, or babies born with too many fingers were a sign the universe was about to do something dramatic. Sadly, there was no way to prepare. No vaccine, no Tylenol, just a sacrifice and a lot of hoping. Entire days were marked off the calendar because someone saw a crow flying backward. And then nature showed up like, you thought that was bad? Floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, especially the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, made Romans feel like the gods were literally throwing tantrums. Cities got wiped out overnight. The fields vanished. People froze mid-meal. And afterward, everyone scrambled to offer sacrifices like sorry notes to the heavens. Those days, the ones where the earth shook or the sky turned black, stayed burned into memory, not because of how many people died, but because it all happened so suddenly. That kind of chaos made Roman people watch the calendar like it was a countdown clock. Romans weren't passive about it. They tried to game the system. Bird watching wasn't a hobby, it was state policy. They read entrails, tracked astrology, and scheduled major decisions around whether the gods were in a good mood. People wore charms like evil eyes and protective trinkets to keep bad spirits away. They made sacrifices before travel, weddings, or legal trials because one wrong step on the wrong day, that could ruin everything. And their calendar, it literally color-coded fear. Dies Albi, white days, good vibes. Dies Atri, black days, bad news. Don't plan anything, don't get married, don't sneeze too loud. Fear was scheduled. So next time you circle a date on your calendar, just remember, for the Romans, that date could have been a full-blown warning label from the gods. Now tell me in the comments, which Roman fear hit you the hardest? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and hit that subscribe button for more.